I cannot accept it, and perhaps I never will. This pain lives within me like a quiet fracture, invisible from the outside, yet inside it opens a fathomless abyss. I enter a store, and the shelves stare back at me with the glassy eyes of packaged stories, pieces of bodies, torn bonds, lives abruptly forced to end. In trays lies the flesh of little brothers and sisters who were never asked, never gave their consent. Guilt is the softest word. What lies there is fear, blood, a scream that cannot be heard, yet the soul recognizes it. It hurts me deeply, not because I am better, but because I cannot make peace with it. About 15 years ago, something inside me switched, an invisible awakening, like a light that at first blinds and wounds the eyes, but then becomes necessary. From that moment, I have been unable to touch meat, to see it without the whole film of suffering unfolding in my mind. Anything that once had eyes and warmth, that moved, loved someone, cannot be my food. I cannot call it a product. Sometimes I tell myself that the world has grown used to hiding what's obvious, that people prefer not to think about the cost of every bite, because then the guilt becomes too heavy to bear. And perhaps that is my suffering that I cannot forget. My body and heart refuse to be accomplices in the great forgetting. I know there are karmic programs, that everything is woven into a wise, though sometimes cruel, pattern of evolution. That when humans eat the bodies of animals, they participate in cycles of interaction, perhaps even supporting these beings' growth into new dimensions or states of soul. But I also know this, that karma writes itself in the opposite direction too, that suffering we cause returns like thunder in the invisible spaces of existence. Sometimes I wonder whether we humans have forgotten what it means to be children of the earth. Why have we allowed ourselves to believe that everything belongs to us, even the lives of others? And as a vegetarian, I know I'm not innocent. For there to be milk, for there to be cheese and butter, somewhere along that chain there is death. There are calves, lambs, kids taken too soon. Because otherwise the herd would grow too large, too expensive, and then the market would lose its balance, that delicate balance where life is calculated as profit. Inside me, two voices struggle, one that wants to be brutally honest, to scream about all this, to tear the veil of illusion, and the other, the quieter one that knows judgment closes hearts while love awakens them. And I want to be that quiet voice, the one that does not attack but asks, that does not accuse but shares human pain, shares a prayer. Sometimes I imagine farms that are like homes where animals live as families, die naturally, and we take only what they willingly give. Yes, I know it sounds like utopia, but dreams are the first form of a future we have not yet dared to build. I would like there to be only such places in the world. Then I could drink milk with a clean conscience, without feeling that some mother has lost her child just to fill my cup. Then food would taste like harmony, not hidden sorrow. But reality is different, and the hardest question is how to look at it without turning to stone from pain. Sometimes in the silence of night I speak to myself, to my fate, to my vulnerability. Where does this compassion come from? Psychoanalysis would say that somewhere in the unconscious lies an old wound, a memory of terror, a fear of violence, of life being taken away. Perhaps in the archetypal layers of memory, each of us carries a remembrance of that, of a voice that was never heard. And my spiritual side says that the heart perceives truth long before the mind, that the soul remembers a world where life is light and every breath is a blessing, a world of original innocence, where no one could kill simply because they can. And so I live between guilt and forgiveness, between the desire to awaken others and the fear of hurting them. This tender truth of mine. How do I tell people that every animal is a soul, that every being loves its life, that that is not a resource but the sorrowful end of something beautiful? How do you speak of suffering without becoming an accuser? How do you approach a heart without frightening it? Perhaps by telling first about your own awakening, without preaching, without slogans, only the truth of a pain whispered, not imposed. Perhaps people need to see the tear in order to believe the words. And still I live with hope. I believe heaven would not have placed such sensitivity in human hearts if it were meaningless. That compassion is the language of a new evolution calling us from within. I believe that one day humanity will expand like light into a wider field of understanding, that there will be another kind of health, another kind of food, another kind of economy in which life is not sold by weight. Perhaps my mission, however small it seems, is to guard this flame, not to let it be extinguished under the weight of convenient excuses, to speak when I can, to remain silent when silence says more. Sometimes I feel alone in this sensitivity, but then I remember that every transformation begins with one person who cannot accept the old. One person who says, "Not like this." One person who hears the cry others silence. And if the least I do is remain faithful to what my heart knows, then perhaps that is enough for now. Because change does not always begin with a revolution. Sometimes it begins with a whisper, with a quiet "I cannot accept it," with a pain that refuses to turn into silence. And there is something else that weighs on me, something I want to add as a whisper in this diary, about the modern authorities, about science, about the doctors and experts who so confidently declare that meat is necessary, that without it the body will weaken, that our health depends on the death of another. They say it with a voice that sounds like woe, like medical order, like a life-saving prescription, and sometimes it seems to me that their words limp away from the truth, that they speak from above without having glanced into the perfect silence of the suffering they prescribe to others. The psychoanalytic eye would see here a defense mechanism, rationalization, cultural norm, projection, a justification through which pain is transformed into knowledge and knowledge into permission to continue. My spiritual side asks something else. Can science be stripped of mercy, or mercy of reason? Can belief in the truth of a diagnosis free us from the moral feeling that awakens when one face meets the face of another living being? And then I imagine these authorities with a knife in hand, even for a moment. I feel not only the irony but also a deep human vulnerability. Could they truly do what they advise? Could they look into the creature's eyes and place a hand upon its throat and then return to their scholarly publication and calm explanation? I think few could. And this is not an accusation, but an observation, a sign of the division between bodily experience and intellectual abstraction. And maybe in that difference lies a possibility for conversation, an invitation to deeper thinking, not to humiliate science, but to call it to be more humane, to place ethics and compassion beside facts, that health advice is not only scientifically correct, but also honest to the soul. Because when words are born from a place that has seen and mourned life, they carry a different tone, less categorical, more willing to ask, more capable of being humbled and transformed. And there is yet another shadow, one that is hard for me to speak about because it is larger than any single person, the shadow of the mafia, of the system of corruption that feeds on fear and greed. When I hear of entire herds, thousands of living beings sentenced to death with a single signature, supposedly because of a disease that no one has seen, a disease that exists only on paper, in an order, in someone's financial scheme, then something inside me breaks in yet another way. Not only because of the killing, but because of the deception, because of that quiet, cold evil that doesn't come from hunger or ignorance, but from calculation, from profit, from business that turns life into currency, into a number, into zero. And when I imagine the veterinarians, people who have sworn to protect life, to heal, signing death sentences without a tear, without a tremor, I ask myself, what happens inside a human being when their conscience is lulled to sleep with money? Psychoanalysis would say that a splitting mechanism is at work. The professional mask separates from the human self, but the spiritual perspective whispers that every betrayal of life is a betrayal of one's own soul, and that nothing passes without leaving a trace. These people could hardly endure being alone in the barn, face to face with the healthy animals, to gently stroke a calf one last time and then give the signal for its end. But a signature from afar creates distance. It makes everything more sterile, more bearable. A signature washes the blood from the hand, or at least that's how it appears. And I ask myself, how many souls must be silenced so that one pocket can be filled? How many hearts must stop feeling so that killing can become an industry? There is a cruelty that is loud, slaughter, knives, panic. But there is another, far more dangerous, the quiet, administrative one, happening in offices, on desks, in air-conditioned rooms where death becomes statistics and suffering a paragraph. This is a cruelty without a face, cruelty that overflows into irresponsibility, cruelty that kills on a massive scale. And then I fold my arms around my chest as if that could hold the world together, stop it from falling apart. Because all this pain, it is not only for the animals, it is for the human being, for what we are becoming, for how deeply we can fall if we keep believing that the lives of others have no value. But I also believe something else, that people who feel these truths are not few, that beneath all the noise and marketing, conscience still breathes, that there are eyes beginning to open and hearts beginning to tremble when they encounter the suffering they have been shielded from for so long. Maybe this is why I write, maybe this is why it hurts, because pain is a bridge. It connects our fragmented humanity to what we can still become. It shows us that despite everything, we are not entirely lost. And I want to believe that one day all this violence will look like a dark past we have left behind, that our evolution will not be measured in technology but in the depth of our compassion, that a time will come when life will no longer be a product nor an economic resource, when no signature will have the power to kill. And then maybe at last we will be able to say that we have returned home to what is human.